Evil man lures a lost 5-year-old child with candy, but what a young black boy does next saves her life. A story that will leave you speechless. What happens halfway through completely changes the ending. We'd love to know what city you're watching this video from, so leave it in the comments. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and tap the notification bell to stay updated on all our content. The sunny afternoon seemed perfect for the town's big annual festival. Colorful balloons floated in the air, children ran between food and game booths, and the cheerful sound of street music filled every corner. In the midst of this vibrant crowd, Anna, a little 5-year-old girl, was mesmerized by everything around her. Her curly hair bounced in the wind as her curious eyes explored the colors and sounds surrounding her. Without realizing it, she wandered away from her mother, who was distracted by shopping at a craft booth and didn't notice her daughter drifting off. Anna wandered among the people, softly calling her mother's name. With each step, she moved farther away from the heart of the festival and closer to a quieter, darker street, far from the joy filling the air. Then, lost and vulnerable, she crossed paths with a man. His appearance was shady and disheveled, and he seemed out of place compared to the rest of the crowd. With a forced smile, the man watched her closely. He held a pack of colorful candy in his dirty hands, waving it in front of the girl. "You're lost, aren't you? I have candy for you," he said in a sweet but falsely friendly voice. Anna, hesitant, didn't know what to do. Her childlike instincts made her want the candy, but something about the man made her feel uneasy. She took a small step toward him, but before she could make a final move, a young, strong voice echoed through the air, "She's my sister." The shout was firm and unexpected. Davi, a 10-year-old black boy, ran over from a nearby booth, his eyes sharp and focused on what was happening. He positioned himself between the man and Anna, firmly holding the girl's hand as if they were truly siblings. The man, caught off guard, backed away for a moment, but before he could try to escape, people around them were already watching with suspicion. He tried to flee, but a group of adults quickly detained him. The police arrived within minutes, and the man was taken away. Anna, still scared, was returned to her mother's arms, who arrived both desperate and thankful at the same time. Davi, though just a boy, was hailed as a hero by the crowd. People commented on his bravery and quick thinking. He had acted fast and protected Anna from a danger no one else seemed to notice. But as everyone celebrated the young hero, something unsettling lingered in the air. Who was that man? And why was he at the festival, trying to lure children? This incident was just the beginning of a much deeper plot, involving the town's dark secrets. The danger wasn't completely gone, and Davi and Anna were about to get caught up in something far bigger and more dangerous than they could have imagined. The sun still shone brightly in the sky, and the town festival continued in full swing. The apparent joy of the local population was reflected in the vibrant colors of the balloons, the laughter of running children, and the lively sounds of the street musicians. For many, that Saturday seemed like just another summer festival, but for Davi, things were far from normal. He couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that danger still lurked, even with the suspicious man now in custody. In the days following the incident at the festival, conversations among the townspeople revolved around Anna's attempted abduction. Everyone talked about Davi's courage, praising the boy for his quick action. Despite all the admiration he received, Davi wasn't convinced that it was over. The behavior of the man who was arrested was strange, and the way he seemed comfortable in the crowd before being caught indicated that he wasn't just an opportunist. Something bigger was going on. That night, while Davi was in his room replaying the events, he heard something strange coming from outside. Curious, he got up and went to the window. The darkness enveloped his house, illuminated only by weak streetlights, when suddenly a shadow moved near the fence. Davi frowned, trying to make out what he was seeing. The hooded figure seemed to be standing still, watching his house directly. His heart raced. Who could it be? And why would they be there? Davi tried to focus better, but before he could do anything, the stranger disappeared into the night. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should tell someone. Maybe he was imagining things, a result of what had happened at the festival. However, deep down, he knew something was wrong. The next day, Davi mentioned the appearance to his father, But without much proof, the matter was quickly dismissed as childish paranoia. However, Davi wasn't willing to ignore the signs. At school, he began talking to his friends about what had happened. That's when, casually, he heard a story that caught his attention. Mateus, a boy the same age as Davi, told a scary story about something that had happened to his younger brother a few weeks earlier. According to Mateus, an unknown man had tried to talk to the boy while he was playing in a park near their house. The man had offered candy, just like the abductor had tried with Anna. Though Mateus' brother had run home frightened, the story had been brushed off by his family, who thought it was just a strange but harmless person. With this new information, Davi started connecting the dots. It wasn't a coincidence. Other kids began mentioning similar encounters. Strangers were approaching children, always offering candy and always trying to lure them to isolated places. The same strategy used with Anna. Davi knew he needed to act, but this time, he couldn't rely on his bravery alone. He needed more information, more proof. He decided that his best chance was to find out who these people were and how they were operating. However, something deep in his mind still troubled him. Why the children? And why did he have the feeling that this wasn't just about kidnapping? That night, as Davi walked home from school, he stopped in front of an old shop window. There, amidst old photos of the town, he saw something that made him stop and look closer. It was a black and white image from many years ago, showing the town festival, but what caught his attention was a grand mansion in the background, perched on a distant hill. He had passed by that mansion before, a building everyone in town knew, but which had long since been abandoned. No one spoke about the place, except for the usual ghost stories kids told each other. Davi wondered if the mansion could be connected to the recent events. Could it be the center of everything? The questions in his mind multiplied, but the answers seemed farther and farther away. He knew he needed to learn more about the town's past, and perhaps the mansion on the hill was the starting point. With his stomach tied in knots and a growing sense that something dark was about to happen, Davi began to plan his next steps. He didn't know what he would find, but he was determined to follow his instincts, because now, more than ever, the safety of the town's children, and maybe even his own family, depended on his courage and determination. Days passed quickly, but the feeling of unease that had settled over Davi didn't fade. He was determined to learn more about what was happening in the town, especially about the mysterious mansion he had seen in the photograph. Despite the looming danger, his curiosity and his desire to protect the children in his community drove him to investigate further. Davi decided he couldn't face this alone. He told his father everything he knew, an honest and hardworking man, known and respected in the community. Though reluctant at first, Davi's father listened carefully to what his son had to say. Mateus' story, the attempted approaches to other children, and of course, the fact that Davi himself had witnessed something strange around his house. Convinced that something was indeed wrong, Davi's father went to the local police station to report the events. However, when he spoke with the police, the response was disappointing. The local authorities were skeptical. To them, the man who had tried to kidnap Anna was already behind bars, and there wasn't enough concrete evidence to suggest a larger operation was taking place. Vague reports of frightened children and stories of shadowy figures weren't enough to launch a full investigation. Despite the frustration felt by Davi and his father, the boy knew he couldn't stop. He needed more information. So, he decided to keep investigating on his own, with the help of his friends. A small group formed, with Mateus and Joao, both smart and curious boys, leading this amateur investigation. They spent recess at school discussing the clues they could find and coming up with plans to learn more about the mansion. That afternoon, as they walked home from school, Davi and Joao decided to stop by a local bar. The place was one of the oldest in town, and according to rumors, some of the older patrons knew the history of the mansion and its former owners well. Sitting at a table in the back, the boys listened carefully to the conversations at the counter. It seemed like an ordinary afternoon, with the typical noise of glasses being served and laughter echoing, but then something caught Davi's attention. Two men sitting in the corner of the bar, half whispering to each other, were talking in a suspicious manner. They mentioned something that made Davi's heart race. The deliveries need to arrive at the house on the hill before the end of the week. The boss won't like delays. Davi looked at Joao, who had also heard the conversation, and both knew this wasn't a coincidence. The mansion on the hill was involved in some way. The boys decided to follow the two men, keeping a safe distance so as not to be noticed. The chase led them to a more remote area of town, on a dirt road that slowly climbed toward the hill. There, they saw something that confirmed their worst fears. Trucks parked near the mansion's entrance, with boxes being quickly unloaded by workers who avoided looking around. The boxes were covered with dark tarps, and Davi couldn't see what was inside, but he knew it wasn't anything good. Hidden behind a tree, Davi and Joao continued to watch. There was no doubt something shady was going on, and the most frightening part was that the deliveries the men had mentioned could be connected to the kidnapping of children. But how could they prove it? How could they convince the police or the adults that something so terrible was happening right under their noses? With adrenaline rushing through their veins, the two boys returned to town that night, thinking of a plan. They needed evidence, something no one could deny or ignore. However, as they tried to come up with a strategy to get closer to the mansion, Davi couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Along the way back, he constantly looked over his shoulder, but he never saw anything. He just felt that unsettling presence, as if invisible eyes were following their every move. When he got home, Davi didn't tell his parents anything. He knew that if they found out what he had done, they would forbid any future attempts to investigate the mansion. He and Joao began planning a second expedition, but this time with the help of more friends. They knew it would be risky, but they were determined to find out what was happening and to protect the town's children. That same night, Anna began having recurring nightmares about the man who had tried to kidnap her. In her dreams, she saw Davi in danger, being dragged into the mansion by shadowy, faceless figures. She woke up scared, unable to understand why these dreams kept coming, but the protective instinct she felt for Davi grew stronger each day. It was as if she somehow knew something terrible was going to happen to him if he continued to get involved. Anna told her mother about the dreams, who tried to reassure her, saying it was just her mind processing the recent scare. However, the little girl was convinced there was more to it. And, unknowingly, Anna was right. The danger was closing in on Davi and his friends, and the truth about the mansion was far darker than any of them could have imagined. Davi couldn't shake the idea that something much bigger was happening at the mansion on the hill. The presence of the trucks and the suspicious conversations he and Joao had overheard at the bar only fueled his determination. He knew he couldn't do this alone, so he decided it was time to share what he knew with more people, but not adults. The adults, so far, had ignored his warnings, trapped in their routines and the belief that the town was safe. But Davi needed allies who would take him seriously. At school, Davi gathered a small group of trusted friends, Joao, Mateus, and Pedro, a 12-year-old boy known for being smart and always involved in the most daring adventures. Davi told them everything he and Joao had discovered, and the three friends, though scared, agreed they needed to keep investigating. Pedro, being the oldest, suggested they set up a stakeout at the mansion to better understand what was happening and find a way to prove their suspicions. They decided that the following Saturday, when the town would be quieter and the adults more distracted, they would approach the mansion at night and observe. Pedro, with his experience in past adventures, had an old camera, the kind with film, and assured them they could take pictures without making any noise. The plan seemed perfect to Davi, although a part of him was still nervous about what they might find. Meanwhile, Anna continued having recurring nightmares. The images of the shadowy man and the mansion haunted her sleep, but now her dreams had become more vivid. She dreamed of Davi being pulled into the mansion by hooded figures, with evil laughter echoing through the walls. However, a new element appeared in her dreams, a woman. She saw this woman faintly, dressed in white, but with an indistinct face, watching everything from a distance. Anna felt that this woman had a connection to the danger surrounding Davi, but she didn't know who she was. Anna told Davi about her dreams. Although he tried to reassure her, saying everything would be fine, he couldn't ignore the intensity of her descriptions. Something inside him told him that Anna was sensing something deeper. Maybe her dreams were a warning, or maybe there was a mysterious connection he didn't yet understand. Either way, he knew he needed to act fast. On Friday night, Davi gathered with Joao, Mateus and Pedro at his house to finalize the plan. Pedro, always meticulous, brought a flashlight, the camera, and some ropes, just in case they needed to climb something or get out of trouble quickly. João was nervous, but determined to keep going. Mateus, on the other hand, remained quiet, but his eyes revealed the fear he felt. Still, he didn't want to back out. They needed to find the truth. The next morning, Davi woke up early, anxious. The plan was to wait until nightfall, when they could leave without their parents suspecting anything. Davi was especially cautious, knowing that if he got caught before even leaving the house, the entire plan would be ruined. The day dragged on, and every second felt like an eternity. When night finally came, the boys met at the town square, as planned. The walk to the mansion was long, especially on foot. Climbing the hill would be tough, but they had already thought of everything. Armed with their backpacks, flashlight, and camera, they began the trek up the dirt road leading to the old mansion. The weather, which had been calm until then, started to change. Dark clouds appeared in the sky, covering the moon and plunging the town into even deeper darkness. As they climbed, the silhouette of the mansion became clearer. The broken windows and moss-covered walls created an atmosphere of abandonment and decay. However, what caught the boys' attention most was the fact that there were faint lights flickering inside the mansion, indicating that it wasn't as deserted as it seemed. When they reached the top of the hill, they crouched behind a stone wall that surrounded the property, trying to stay out of sight. From where they were, they could see men coming and going through the back door. They were carrying boxes and loading them into the trucks. The boys stayed still, trying to take in every detail. Pedro prepared the camera, taking a few pictures from a distance, without using the flash to avoid drawing attention. Then, something unexpected happened. Suddenly, the mansion's gate slowly opened, as if someone had noticed their presence. Davi's heart raced. He signaled for everyone to stay down, but it was too late. One of the men, holding a flashlight, pointed it directly at the wall where the boys were hiding. "Who's there?" the man shouted, his voice hoarse and impatient. The boys, not knowing what to do, froze. Pedro, always the quickest, grabbed Davi's arm, whispering for them to run. They suddenly got up and bolted down the hill, with the man's fast footsteps echoing behind them. The chase was frantic. Davi could hear João's labored breathing next to him, but none of them dared to look back. As they ran, the images of the mansion and the men loading the mysterious boxes were seared into their minds. It was proof that something illegal was happening there. However, when they reached town, they noticed that something strange was happening with João. He was pale and out of breath, as if he had seen something the others hadn't. When Davi asked what had happened, João only murmured, I saw someone at the gate. It was a woman. She was watching everything." Davi felt a chill run down his spine. João described the woman in white, the same one Ana saw in her nightmares. But how was that possible? How could João have seen the same mysterious figure that only existed in Ana's dreams? The truth was getting closer, but at the same time, the danger was also growing. Something very dark was happening at that mansion, and Davi knew they couldn't stop until they uncovered what it was. But as they delved deeper into this mystery, the shadow of danger began to envelop not just Davi and his friends, but also Ana. After the frantic run the night before and the disturbing revelations from João, Davi knew they were in dangerous territory. The presence of that mysterious woman in the mansion and the connection to Ana's nightmares made everything even more unsettling. Time was running out, and the mansion on the hill was revealing itself to be darker and more threatening with each discovery. But Davi couldn't stop now. He knew that beyond what they had already seen, there was something much bigger happening. He and his friends needed a solid plan to rescue the children they believed were being held captive in that mansion. The next morning, while still processing the previous night's events, Davi gathered his group of friends in a discreet location, the old abandoned garage at the end of the street. They knew they couldn't go back to the mansion without being prepared. They needed to come up with a plan involving surveillance, gathering evidence, and, if necessary, a daring rescue. Pedro, who had always been the most strategic of the group, brought an old map of the town, with the mansion marked on it. He pointed to a less visible path behind a wooded area that circled the hill, suggesting they could use it to get closer without being detected. This path, abandoned for many years, was a narrow trail that almost no one knew about. "If we want real evidence, we'll need to get closer, maybe even go inside if we can," Pedro said with a serious expression. Davi knew they needed outside help, but after the failed attempt to alert the police, he couldn't fully trust the local authorities. Even so, he had an idea. His older cousin Lucas was an aspiring journalist, always looking for sensational stories to make a name for himself. If they could convince him to investigate, he could use his credibility to attract the attention of the media and the police to the case. The risk was great, but Davi was determined. That afternoon, Davi went to Lucas' house. He knew his cousin could be impulsive, but he was also brave and determined. After telling him everything they had discovered, from the attempted kidnappings to the strange operations at the mansion, Lucas was intrigued. "If what you're saying is true, this is bigger than any of us can imagine," he said, already thinking about how to turn it into an explosive story. But Lucas was smart and knew he would need solid evidence before publishing anything. With Lucas on their side, Davi and his group now had a more robust plan. They would make a nighttime incursion into the mansion the following weekend. The goal was twofold. Lucas would bring a professional camera to capture more detailed images, and the boys would scout the area, noting escape routes and any evidence that the children were being held there. However, Lucas warned them, "This is dangerous. If something goes wrong, you need to get out as quickly as possible. We can't afford to get caught." Meanwhile, Anna continued having nightmares, more vivid each time. The dreams now showed not just Davi in danger, but a group of children she didn't know, all trapped in a dark room. The children were crying, calling for their mothers, while the woman in white stood still, watching everything with cold, distant eyes. Anna tried to warn Davi, but she felt he was already on a path of no return. On the night planned for the operation, Davi made sure everything was in order. Pedro had brought a small kit with a flashlight, ropes, and Lucas' camera. João was more nervous than ever, but knew he had to be there to support the group. They waited until complete darkness, when the town's activity died down, and then began their walk to the hill. As they approached the mansion, following the wooded path Pedro had suggested, the atmosphere grew heavier. The night was eerily quiet, and the moonlight barely managed to break through the thick clouds. As they climbed the hill, the sound of their own breathing and footsteps echoed between the trees. Finally, they reached the mansion's wall. It was a tall, decaying structure with parts covered in ivy and moss, but there were spots where the wall was broken, making it easier to slip through. They crept to the back of the property, where they had previously seen the men unloading boxes. Luckily, there was less activity that night. Davi signaled for Lucas to start taking pictures while Pedro and João began to explore the windows and doors of the mansion more closely. That's when, by chance, Davi found something that made his blood run cold. A small window in the basement, slightly ajar. From there, he could hear low voices and muffled cries. His heart raced. He knew the children were in there. Without thinking twice, he frantically signaled to the others. Pedro came closer and listened too. "We need to get in," Davi said, his voice trembling. Lucas, always more cautious, hesitated. "If we go in now, without more evidence, we might get caught. But if we don't, we won't save those kids in time," he said, weighing the risks. They all knew they were about to do something extremely dangerous. The side door of the mansion, which seemed to lead to an abandoned kitchen, was unlocked. Carefully, Davi opened the door slowly, trying not to make any noise. Inside, the atmosphere was dark and dusty. They were in a narrow hallway, dimly lit by a few old lamps. The sounds were coming from a room further back. Walking silently, the group reached a large room with several boxes stacked around. That's when they saw it. Inside the room, in a dark corner, there were 6 children, tied up and visibly scared. They were being watched by 2 men who, judging by their tired appearance, weren't expecting anyone to break into the mansion that night. Lucas, without wasting time, began discreetly photographing the children and the situation they were in. Pedro, always alert, quickly assessed the position of the guards and the possible exits. It was clear that these men weren't expecting visitors and were distracted, talking among themselves. Davi knew they couldn't leave those children there, but they also knew that if they were discovered, the rescue would fail. The next step would be decisive, trying to get the children out without drawing attention or acting rashly, putting everyone at risk. Anna's dreams became more vivid, and one day, while walking past an old shop with her mother, something made her stop. In the window, an old photo caught her attention. It was of the mansion on the hill, many years ago, before it was abandoned. Next to the photo stood a woman smiling with a baby in her arms. Anna felt a chill. It was the same woman from her dreams. She was certain that this woman had something to do with everything. But how? She told Davi what she had discovered, and together they decided they needed to uncover the secret of that photo. Davi and Anna started investigating more about the woman in the photo. They discovered that she was a wealthy heiress who had lived in the mansion decades ago before disappearing mysteriously. The baby she held in the photo? No one knew what had happened to him. The clues began to fall into place. Davi and Anna found out that the woman was the grandmother of the man who had tried to kidnap Anna at the festival. He had grown up in the shadow of his family and gotten involved in illegal activities. But there was still a deeper, more sinister connection between the mansion and the missing children. With the rescue plan in motion, Davi and his friends managed to gather enough evidence to take to the police. However, they knew they had to act quickly before the criminals fled. An ambush was organized with the help of a local detective, but something didn't go as planned. In the middle of the rescue, the criminals realized they were being watched. A fierce confrontation took place at the mansion, and Davi, João, and Anna found themselves trapped. In the darkness of the night, surrounded by the criminals, Davi had to think fast. He and Anna were captured and taken to a secret basement in the mansion, where they confronted the leader of the operation, the man who had tried to kidnap Anna at the festival. But then, the shocking revelation came to light. The man wasn't just any criminal. He was the baby in the photo. He had grown up in the mansion and, out of revenge for being abandoned by his family, had started trafficking children. He saw in Anna a connection to his past, something that tormented him. Just when everything seemed lost, the police raided the mansion, saving Davi, Anna, and the other children. The man was arrested, and his story finally came to light. He had been abandoned by his mother, the woman in the photo, and had since lived in pursuit of revenge. However, the biggest revelation came later. Anna's mother was actually a distant relative of the criminal, and Anna carried the same blood that he hated so much. This connection had been what triggered his obsession with the little girl. The town returned to normal, but Davi and Anna would never forget what they had been through. Davi's bravery had been crucial in saving Anna and many other children, and together they realized that the past always finds a way to reveal itself, even in the most unexpected circumstances.